Have you ever noticed that the more you explain yourself, the more fragile you seem? That the more available you are, the less value others place on you? Machiavelli discovered a dark secret. It's not kindness that protects, but the ability to become indecipherable. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that the end justifies the means, and the most brutal way to shield yourself is to learn not to be controlled by the gaze of others. While everyone else chases approval, you must pursue strategic invisibility. Better to be feared than loved, and when you understand this, something inside you changes forever. This secret isn't shared in self-help books. It's uncomfortable, controversial, almost forbidden, because being unattainable isn't about smiling more, it's about knowing when to disappear. It's not about speaking beautifully, it's about using silence as a weapon. It's not about dressing up in virtue, but about controlling its appearance with a cold hand. Constant adaptability isn't an option, it's about survival. The real game doesn't reward those who want to be loved, but those who learn to avoid being hated while commanding respect. And it's at this point that virtù and fortuna meet, creating an aura no one dares cross. Get ready. From now on, you'll discover not only how Machiavelli thought, but how to apply it to your daily life. You'll understand why some people command entire rooms without raising their voices, why some disappear and return stronger, why some transform their very absence into power. And above all, you'll learn how to become someone no one can touch, no one can control, no one can break, because being unattainable isn't a choice of vanity, but a matter of survival. Imagine living in a world where your every gesture is read like an open manual. People around you begin to anticipate your responses, predict your steps, almost as if they had access to the password to your behavior. This is where the real secret comes in, breaking patterns to avoid being predictable. Machiavelli knew that a life guided by routine is a life handed over to the enemy, because whoever reads you guides you. Human beings by nature seek comfort in the familiar, but in politics guided by reality, not ideals. Those who oscillate between virtù and fortuna dominate. The end justifies the means, and in this case the means is your ability to surprise. It's not about being inconsistent, but about being indecipherable. Change your way of responding, alternate your times of appearance, and don't give clear clues about your next move. This is how you prevent your presence from being used as an instruction manual against you. The indecipherable isn't someone who puts on a show or masks themselves in random appearances, but rather someone who consciously decides not to be held hostage by a visible routine. How many times have you noticed someone stuck in the same predictable pattern of messages, schedules, and speeches? Just observe. Whenever you can predict someone, you, in a way, already have control over them. Decisions based on real human nature brutally demonstrate this. People seek security in the predictable, but respect those who offer the mystery of the unexpected. Virtue lies not in repetition, but in constantly adapting, like someone who rewrites their own logic before others can decipher it. A practical example. Consider a leader who, instead of always speaking up in meetings, alternates between strategic silence and powerful speech. He's not ignored. On the contrary, everyone pays attention because they don't know when the word that could change the course of the conversation will come. This is the art of using calculated force, not only in action, but also in cadence. The indecipherable becomes an invisible wall. It's not controlled by outside armies, but rather guides its own loyal ones. And precisely because of this ability to be read and never deciphered, it opens the door to another, even more powerful weapon, silence, which, when used well, carries more weight than any word. Some people think power lies in verbosity, in speaking louder, faster, more convincingly. But if you observe closely, you'll notice that the most feared rarely waste words. Machiavelli would say that in politics guided by reality, not ideals, silence can be a sharper sword than any speech. When you delay responding, when you create calculated pauses, you force the other person to move in your absence. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is what's left unsaid, creating anxiety, speculation, and even respect. The curious thing is that the less you say, the more the room leans in to hear you when you do decide to speak. Strategic silence isn't cowardice, it's virtue in action, transforming nothingness into tangible strength. Practical examples of this are everywhere. Think of a negotiator who, upon hearing a proposal, doesn't respond immediately. The pause, that space of seconds that feel like minutes, makes the other side rethink, justify themselves, perhaps even offer more than they had planned. It's the calculated use of force in time, not volume. The same is true in relationships. If, instead of over-explaining or rushing to fill the void, you let the silence weigh heavily, the other person reveals themselves. Decisions based on real human nature show that no one can stand emptiness. The tendency is to fill it, often with information, concessions, or confessions that would never emerge from an eager talker. And there's another vital detail. Silence creates an aura. It puts you in the shoes of the observer, the one who dominates themselves and therefore dominates the game. Better to be feared than loved, and silence is the most direct way to cultivate this fear without having to raise your voice. Controlled silence doesn't generate hatred because it's not a direct attack, but it does make it clear that you don't bow to the immediacy of others. It's the appearance of virtue mixed with lucid coolness. It seems calm, but it's pure strategy. And the most fascinating thing is that when you learn to use silence, you discover that it's not absence, but presence. A presence so powerful that it paves the way for the next step, strategic withdrawal, which isn't an escape, but a surgical strike to control others. Disappearing is scarier than appearing. When someone disappears deliberately without warning, without explanation, the minds of those left behind become a battlefield. Machiavelli knew that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires this kind of maneuver, an absence that destabilizes more than 1,000 words. The end justifies the means, and disappearing is often the only way to break emotional dependence and the control of others. But make no mistake, fleeing is cowardice, retreating is virtue. The difference lies in the surgical return at the carefully chosen moment, when absence has already eroded certainties and your reappearance provokes a veritable psychological collapse in those who believed they had control over you. Examples are clear in real life. A leader who misses every meeting but returns only at crucial moments transforms their presence into an impact. Someone who interrupts a cycle of automated messages and reappears with a pointed phrase puts everyone on alert. It's the calculated use of force in time and space, creating a contrast between silence and return. Even loyal armies have always known how to use retreat as a war tactic. Retreating isn't losing, it's preparing the ground for victory. Decisions based on real human nature show that human beings fear the unexpected void more than direct confrontation. And the most powerful aspect of this strategy is the halo effect. By disappearing, you eliminate the addiction to predictability. Avoiding being hated remains the rule. It's not abandonment, it's a strategic pause. Better to be feared than loved, and skillful withdrawal does just that. It arouses fear without resentment, because deep down, everyone understands that absence is not an attack. It's the appearance of virtue maintained by cool hands, unshaken by the need to please or be available. When you master strategic withdrawal, you discover that true power lies not in being always present, but in being a rare presence. And it's in this contrast that the shielding of your reputation is born. the famous appearance of virtue that keeps your name untouchable even when you're not around. The great art of power lies not in being virtuous, but in appearing so. Machiavelli was clear. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires that reputation shine while hands remain cold. The appearance of virtue is an invaluable shield. You gain trust, admiration, and standing without having to deliver what everyone believes they see. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is the image built with calculation and constancy. Most people strive to be good, but the strategist understands that appearing good is enough. As long as you project virtue before others, you can make decisions based on true human nature without anyone questioning it. A practical example: think of public figures who maintain a discourse of kindness, solidarity, and unwavering morality. They make a fortress of their smile and impeccable posture. However, behind the scenes, they exercise calculated force, choosing who to support, who to cut, when to remain silent, and when to expose themselves. This dichotomy is brutal. Being loved for appearances, but respected for real impact. Better to be feared than loved, but when the appearance of virtue is solid, you achieve both. And at the same time, you avoid being hated, because no one can hate a carefully polished image of justice, even if, deep down, their decisions are cold as ice. The key is not to confuse appearance with submission. Those who live only to be seen as good end up vulnerable. But those who use virtue as a mask, without abandoning strategic coldness, become untouchable. It's like a two-sided coin. On one side, you display virtue, compassion, and a smile. On the other, you calculate, choose, and manage your own loyal armies. Constant adaptability is what separates the naive from the leader, knowing when to don the cloak of virtue and when to let cold hands lead the way. And it is precisely from this mixture that true respect is born. Not that earned by sympathy, but that shaped by the balance between an aura of kindness and a hardness no one can see. There's a fine line between respect and resentment, and it's on this line that true power is built. Machiavelli warned, it's better to be feared than loved, but it's vital to avoid being hated. Fear creates discipline, but hatred breeds revolt. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that it's not kindness that sustains command, but clarity of consequences. Those who set firm boundaries, communicate without hesitation, and never need to humiliate in public generate natural obedience. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is the ability to inspire respect without creating room for resentment. In practice, this means never exposing anyone to ridicule. Think of a leader who, instead of correcting a subordinate in front of everyone, takes them aside and speaks firmly without raising their voice. The impact is profound. The limit is established, authority is asserted, but there is no public resentment. This is the calculated use of force in its most refined form. The person learns that a wall exists, but feels no need to seek revenge. Decisions based on real human nature make it clear that human beings accept fear when there is apparent justice. And this is where the appearance of virtue comes in. You appear fair, but keep a cool head when you need to enforce the rule. This balance is what separates lasting leaders from those who fall prematurely. Virtue lies not only in conquering, but in maintaining power without burning the bridges that sustain your base. This is where loyal armies make the difference. Those who fear, respect. Those who respect, remain by your side. Constant adaptability ensures that you never cross the line into hatred, but also never lose yourself in the illusion of blind love. It's a game of shadows and lights, in which power manifests itself without needing to be explained. And when this strategy becomes clear in practice, the next step emerges. The scarce no, refusal as the currency of authority, which multiplies the weight of your presence. A yes opens doors, but a no builds walls. Machiavelli knew that, in politics guided by reality, not ideals, the true measure of power lies in one's ability to fearlessly deny. The end justifies the means. To refuse is to create scarcity, and scarcity always creates value. The rarer your yes, the more precious it becomes. Ordinary people say yes to avoid conflict, to be loved, to avoid causing discomfort. But those who understand the game know it's better to be feared than loved. And a scarce no is the most subtle way to be feared without having to raise your voice. It's like a rare coin. Every time it appears, it changes the entire market. Want practical examples? Think of someone who accepts every invitation, every conversation, every demand. Over time, this person loses value because they're always available. Now imagine someone who says no most of the time, but when they do say yes, they deliver something memorable. This is the calculated use of force applied to time and attention. It's like an investor who doesn't invest money in every opportunity that presents itself, but waits for the right move, analyzing with strategic coolness. Decisions based on real human nature show that human beings always desire more what is difficult to obtain. Thus, no becomes an invisible wall, and the agenda becomes a fortress. Those who cross it understand their privilege. And there's also the devastating psychological effect. No forces the other person to reorganize, rethink, and appreciate. By denying, you command respect without having to ask. By restricting access, you create an aura. Avoiding being hated remains crucial, and so the secret is not to deny arrogantly, but to deny neutrally. An appearance of virtue, cool hands. You appear busy, responsible, selective, but behind it all lies virtue, the awareness that your attention is gold. Loyal armies are formed not by those who receive everything, but by those who have learned to bide their time. And when no becomes your weapon, a natural need arises to test the loyalty of those who remain even in the face of rejection. Loyalty is not measured in speeches, but in small frictions. Machiavelli understood that in a politics guided by reality, not ideals, what defines who is truly on your side is not the public oath, but the details of behavior. The end justifies the means. Provoking small tensions is the most subtle way to reveal who is an ally and who is merely putting on an act. Invisible tests of loyalty don't need to be declared. They happen when you set limits, when you say no, when you withdraw from the scene. Those who disappear at the first sign of trouble would never be part of your own loyal armies. Those who remain, even in silence or at a distance, prove themselves worthy of your trust. Examples of this appear in both friendships and business. A friend who is only there when you give in, but disappears when you impose limits, has already revealed their true position. A partner who demands immediate approval for every idea, but doesn't tolerate it when you question it, also shows fragility. The one who accepts friction, who continues walking by your side even after hearing no, is the one who demonstrates virtue. Decisions based on true human nature show that most human beings only support when there is a direct benefit. Therefore, it is necessary to create situations where there is no immediate gain, only the opportunity to prove loyalty. And here's the detail many overlook. These tests can't feel like tests. If you expose the game, you lose their effect. It's like a general observing his army on the march. He doesn't warn when it's going to rain. He doesn't warn when food will run out. He just observes who resists and who complains. Avoiding hatred remains important, but not to the point of never challenging. A veneer of virtue, cool hands. You appear fair and balanced, but behind the scenes you observe every reaction with strategic coldness. And the beauty is that these silent tests reveal much more than words. Those who fail in the shadows would fail in broad daylight. And those who pass deserve access to the inner circle, where controlled emotions are the key to staying. Those who lose control of themselves surrender control to others. Machiavelli knew that in politics guided by reality, not ideals, true power lies not in reacting, but in choosing when and if to react. The end justifies the means, and here the means is strategic coolness. When someone tries to provoke and you remain unfazed, you dismantle the enemy's weapon without needing to counterattack. Better to be feared than loved, and nothing generates more fear than someone who refuses to be manipulated by emotional triggers. Virtue-like appearance, cool hands. On the outside, serenity. On the inside, calculation. This is how authority is effortlessly gained. In practice, this applies in any arena. Imagine a tense negotiation. The other side raises their voice, tries to pressure, makes veiled threats. If you react in kind, you lose the game. But if you take a deep breath, let the silence work, and respond calmly, you put the other party in an uncomfortable position. The same happens in relationships. When someone expects you to explode and you don't react, power shifts. This is the calculated use of force, not raising your sword at every provocation, but saving it until the moment it really matters. Decisions based on real human nature make it clear, whoever dominates themselves dominates the scene. And the most interesting thing is that controlling emotions doesn't mean becoming stone cold. It means learning to channel them. Virtue and fortune go hand in hand when you understand that every emotion is energy, and energy can be converted into strategy. An insult can become fuel for focus. A rejection can become strength to move forward. Avoiding being hated remains essential. It's not about crushing the other, but about never stooping to the level of dirty play. Invisible power arises from constant adaptability. You choose what you feel, when you show it, and when you transform. And in this process, you learn that the greatest luxury is not reaction, but controlled access to your own center. And it is precisely this internal control that paves the way for the next secret. The price of access. Everything that is scarce becomes valuable. Machiavelli would understand that in a politics guided by reality, not ideals, your time is the rarest gold you possess. The end justifies the means. Filtering who can approach you is a way of shielding not only your energy, but also your position. The mistake most make is opening doors without criteria, as if anyone deserves unrestricted access. Better to be feared than loved, and part of this fear arises when people realize they can't simply reach you. An appearance of virtue, cold hands. On the outside, cordiality. On the inside, layers of protection. Those who pay respectfully are let in. Those who don't pay are left outside. Practical example, think of high-level professionals, CEOs, artists or strategists. They don't answer every call. They don't reply to every message. They don't schedule meetings with just anyone. There are filters, secretaries, and closed schedules. It's not arrogance, it's the calculated use of force applied to time. Decisions based on real human nature show that the harder it is to access, the more people value being able to cross the barrier. This even happens in personal relationships. When you're not always available, your presence becomes an event. It's scarcity transformed into silent authority. The secret lies in building intelligent gatekeeping. This doesn't mean closing yourself off from the world, but creating layers. Some have access to your words, few have access to your time, very few have access to your privacy. Virtue and fortune go hand in hand when you clearly define who's in and who's out. Avoiding hatred follows as a rule. It's not about humiliating, but about selecting. And the beauty of this selection is that it creates expectation, desire, even mystique. Loyal armies of their own don't arise from excessive access, but from the privilege granted to a few. And when the price of access is understood, their presence ceases to be routine and becomes a spectacle. like a ghost that appears only when it matters. The most powerful presence is not constant, but selective. Machiavelli knew that in a politics guided by reality, not ideals, constant appearance weakens impact. The end justifies the means. If you want your presence to matter, you need to transform each appearance into an event, not a routine. Better to be feared than loved, and nothing inspires more respectful awe than the one who appears like a ghost, rarely seen but always remembered. Virtue-like appearance, cold hands, everyone thinks you're approachable, but in practice no one knows when they'll have the chance to face you again. In practical life, this is evident in leaders who precisely choose where and when to expose themselves. A CEO who doesn't attend every meeting but only shows up at critical moments makes every word seem like a sentence. A digital strategist who doesn't post every day, but when he does, delivers something devastating, transforms each publication into an impact. This is the calculated use of force applied to time, not giving crumbs of presence, but serving rare banquets. Decisions based on real human nature prove that human beings are addicted to scarcity. Those who are seen all the time lose their charm. Those who are rare become myths. And then there's the construction of mystique. Being rarely seen breeds speculation. People talk about you even when you're not there, because absence creates space for projections. Virtue and fortune meet here. You don't need to expend constant energy because your shadow already commands. Avoiding being hated remains vital. Don't disappear to the point that it's interpreted as contempt, but enough so that each return seems like a supernatural apparition. Loyal armies of your own maintain themselves because they believe they serve someone greater than themselves. Someone who appears as an oracle, not as an ordinary neighbor. And it is at this point that you become unattainable, not a man of flesh and blood, but a ghost who commands multitudes simply by the rarity of your presence. Now the question is, will you continue to be predictable, always available, always explaining every gesture? Or will you apply what you learned here to become unattainable? Because Machiavelli already showed, politics guided by reality, not ideals, doesn't reward those who overexpose themselves, but rather those who master the art of silence, withdrawal, and the appearance of virtue with cool hands. The end justifies the means, and in this case, the means is taking control of your own narrative. Stop and think, who today would have the courage to test you if they knew you never lose your temper? Who would dare manipulate you if they understood that the price of access to your time is extremely high? Who would still have power over you if they realized that your no is scarce and that your presence is a ghost rare and devastating? Better to be feared than loved, as long as you know how to avoid being hated. And respect is born precisely in this balance. So I ask you, will you continue living to please, or will you learn to command? Will you lose yourself trying to be loved, or will you finally discover the freedom of being respected? If the answer is change, the time is now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue learning with me how to transform knowledge into real power. Because whoever understands this dark secret of Machiavelli is never controlled again.